I was going to do a video on how I added the light on the machine gun. It's basically just a little LED, a red LED on the front, and then I ran the wires back and down into the tank. So the first thing you got to do, well, in this case, before I take the shell off, is you would remove the gun, and you can have it in either place. So you remove this portion. Mine's got the two wires there. Of course, yours won't. And then this will wiggle out, and it has a slot in there. So you need to take out the gun, this holder, and then this mount. All three of those have to come out. On the underside, you'll have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 screws you'll need to remove. This one is the 7.0 version. That's important to note. Once the 5 screws are removed, I just lift up the top, carefully lay it on its side. Now on the 7.0 version, you'll notice that this bundle of cables come up. It's held by this little harness support. And then if you follow it over, it comes to this little cylinder, and it might be a little hard to see, but that rotates. Yeah, you can't see it. The outside is stationary, but where the wires go in, that part is made to rotate. Now, on the older ones, they don't have that. I don't know exactly how it looks. But also this gear for rotating the turret has a notch. Well, it's not really a notch in, it's just there's no teeth. And that way the turret stops at a certain angle when it's facing back. You can't point the gun straight back. So on this one, it's got the teeth all the way around, so you just keep spinning it. The only thing I'm worried about is there's going to be little wipers in there, which are like just little electrical contacts that run along rings. And that's what allows something like this to be able to sit there and turn the turret as many times as you desire. So the next step is, I had bent that down. There's a little screw here. You take that out, and it just kind of frees up, gives you a little bit more slack on this wire, and you'll want that. And then the next thing to do is there is 3 screws that hold the turret on. Before I jump over there, let's see. Okay. So on these units, the red, yellow wires go to the rear lights, if your tank has them. The next set is red, black, and that goes to the front headlights. This should have 2. And what I did is I just painted mine the silver and amber, like clear amber. Mine only has the one light here. That's not prototypically correct. And then same over here. So I have LEDs coming. I'd like to change them both, but I'm afraid that'll be too much draw on the receiver and it may burn it up. So what I'm going to do, I'll leave this LED there, but all this, it's just pressed in. I'll pop everything out, drill a hole in here for a 5mm LED, same on the other side. And then down here where you see the wires coming up to the LED, I'll cut those off. And then the new headlight will be somewhere in this area, because that's where it snaps in. And then what you do is you parallel over another pair of red and black. Well, it doesn't matter what color wire, but over to what the other headlight over here. So I kind of got off on a tangent, but anyway, that's what I plan on doing next. This was a little harder, so I thought I'd do that first. So yeah, the red and black's the front headlights. The next two is your brown and black, and on this tank, when I trace them, they come all the way up into this bundle that rotates. Now, if your tank is a 6.0 and doesn't have that, then I'm not quite sure what you're going to find. On my sheet, that position is LED 5. And you can always test it with a voltage meter. Just have to be real careful. You might want to get somebody to help you when you press the machine gun button, because this Walker Bulldog does not have the machine gun. It makes a sound, but it doesn't have a light for it. Where all the other ones I have, like the Sherman, has the gun in the lower portion, not the turret. And so if I were to look at that board and follow those wires, it just comes right over. And in that case, you don't have to worry about rotation. On the older ones, if the turrets can't rotate all the way around like mine, well, you don't have to worry about it. But if it does rotate all the way around, you want to make sure you go about it the way I'm showing you. So let me go ahead and pop off that gear and that holder here. The reason I take that off is because it just allows for more slack when you're trying to work on this. You might note that I just take the ring once I take the 3 screws off and just move it all the way over and just lay it on top of the tank, because now it's out of the way. I took the other screw out, so now I have all kinds of play on this wire. So I put the shell back on. Here's the wire going up to the rotational cylinder there. There are 5 screws on the bottom of the turret. The one that's painted, the one that's farthest back here, you do not take that one out. But that back black one, it's important to note that that one's going to be a little shorter. So just make note of that. If you try to put it in another position, I don't know what might happen. Or if you put a long one back here, it may come out the top a little bit or deform it. Once you have those screws loose, so here's the 4 and the one that's slightly shorter, like I said it would be. Just set that on top of the tank. You've got a decent amount of room to work with here. Oh, I was going to say there's 2 little nubs. I don't know if I can. So you just carefully remove that bottom. But note, there are 2 little nubs here. So before you pull on the front underside of the turret, just take your time and use something to maybe lightly pry, because those 2 little nubs, you don't want to break those off. And if you angle it too much when you're trying to pull it off, it will break them off. Okay, found a position, not saying it's going to stay there, but I found a position where it's not going to go anywhere. So here's what I did. Here's the inside of the bottom of the turret. So they kept the same wire color. You can see your black and your brown behind here. Okay. That goes into this board. The board cannot be removed, as most of you probably know if you've looked around inside these. Sometimes they like to use some kind of black goo. It's almost like an epoxy, and that's what's holding that board in. But the two traces on this board go over to the second two pins back. On mine, they appear to be black. They're not black. They're going to be silver, just like these two in the front. And also note, I snipped these two in the front a little shorter, so it'd be easier to get to the two pins in the back. So at this point, you would need to carefully test an LED, or it's easier for me with an LED because an LED does have polarity and you need to turn it one way or the other. If you're not getting the flashing when you touch on here, you don't want to short that. Just put one leg on one side and carefully put one leg on another. And my advice is have somebody else press down on the machine gun button. If you want to, I turned the volume down so it wouldn't drive me nuts. And I just used Scotch tape over the machine gun button. And then came in here, saw my LED flashing, or if I didn't, I would flip it around and try again. And then you know which one is positive and negative. Okay, so what I did in this case to make it easier, I kind of ran it up around the back here to keep it clean, is I soldered two short wires, one here, and it comes up and over, and then one here that comes up and over. And then I put heat shrink on there, and then I took the end of the soldering iron and just lightly went around the edge, the sides of the heat shrink tube, so it would, shrink down. And that's where cutting off the top of those two helped. I'm pretty sure it's opposite of the way they got this printed. It says positive, negative. I want to say my positive was on the right side and negative was on the left. Now this again is for a 7.0 version. You might, if you have a version 6 and you find this on your board, it's either not going to be plugged in, so you might, in that case, I probably would want to buy a little harness. I wouldn't go rigging it the way I did. But in my case, I didn't want to mess around with ordering a harness or anything, so I just did this. The traces underneath here that the brown and black go straight over to these pins and nothing else. One of the wires, it does not matter what wire, has a 330 ohm resistor on it. Now, the LED I used is extremely small. I forgot what they have code sizes for it. I think it's a 402. It's like 1 millimeter by half a millimeter. And that's the hardest part. It's soldering that on there. So there is two different areas you could come down because there is two different gun mounts. But what you're seeing here is the bottom of my gun mount that I said had that slot, and I just pulled it out. So in that mount and the one above it, I got what's called a pin vise and it just allows you to put very small drill bits in it. This wire is made by a company called Circuitron, and it's called ultrafine. I think it's called ultrafine hookup wire. I love it. I've done a lot of HO train stuff, and it works great. It actually it's stranded. I think it's 32 gauge, and it has 4 strands in there, and it's no larger than 15 thousandths of an inch in diameter, and that's with the insulation on. So once you're at that point and you've drilled your hole up and through, let's see, look, I think I've finished this up pretty much. So one of the wires is going to come out and basically just solder to one of these wires that you have coming out. Okay, I just did that to make it easier. And then one wire comes up and goes to one end of the resistor, and then the other end, and then back. Now, when you're testing a regular 5mm LED, it's already set up for one of those, so you don't need a resistor. But in my case, I'm using a very small LED, and it would burn it up. If I didn't put a resistor on there, it'd blow it. And that's the last thing you want. So that is pretty much it. I'll touch on a few things on the gun real quick here. As I believe I said, I had to remove the gun and the mount that allows it to rotate. Yeah, you can see the wires underneath there. Let's see if I can get that off there. Yeah. All right. So I don't know if it's a phone camera, so yeah, it's probably not going to pick that up very well. That's probably the best you're going to get. That white thing, that's the LED. And I'll go over to the table and show real quick kind of how I did it. But once that's soldered on, then I glued that onto the top. I like to take just like a drop of super glue. I can't pronounce the long name of it, but it's basically super glue. A lot of people just call it CA for short. And I found the middle there and pressed it on with the wires hanging out. And the wires just kind of hang straight down. Press it on there for a good 10, 15, 20 seconds, just so it's not going anywhere. And then just lay it down, let it set up for a bit. And then I went around the edges of the gun with like a toothpick or something. I would dab in the glue and go around all 3 of the edges, and even on the side that has the wire. And what that does is it kind of acts like a fillet. It kind of fills it in and makes it a stronger bond. Okay, so I pointed my wires down. Really sorry, it's probably can't even see it, but that's a good thing because guns don't have wire. All right, there you go. There's an area where I didn't tack it all the way up. You see that little slit? That is the wire where it should be up against the gun. So what I did is I just ran the wires down the bottom side of the gun, and every so often, maybe, I don't know, a 1/4 inch or so, I took like an X-Acto knife, and I would get a little bit of the CA on it, and then come in and lightly just put that on the wire on both sides. And then I would press and hold it. Let it dry, move up a little bit, put a little bit of the glue on there, press and hold it. I'm not sure what this is called, this little piece on the gun that hangs down. I ran one wire on one side and one on the other. Now this is picking up pretty good. And I just kind of pressed it anytime it would stair step or do whatever. I would press it down with, say, like a screwdriver like this, or the back side of the X-Acto knife works pretty good. Just not too hard. You're trying to avoid just having gaps, so where it stair steps. And again, I just keep putting light tacks of that on there, because if something happens to that LED, you can see it pretty good there where it's sticking out, that little white thing. That way you can get it off without a huge mess. I had run the wire down in this area. You'll know because it's in line. It's pretty much in line with this mount that allows it to pivot the gun up and down, the center of it. So I just found the center of here. An X-Acto knife's good to use. If it is a brand new blade, I wouldn't recommend that. It's too easy for that tip to just snap right off. I put the tip as close to the center as I can find, and I'll spin it a few times and then look at it and say, is that center? And then if not, I'll move the tip over a little bit and spin it a few times, find that center, and then with your pin vise and small drill, since the wire's 15 thousandths of an inch, you go up to 40, 50 thousandths to be fine. Mine's drilled larger than it needs to be. And carefully just drill that straight up, and it's going to come out just under that mount. And then you thread your wire through there. And then this piece, like I said, it's not glued on, but I don't want to mess with it right now. If you wiggle it side to side, there's a slot where this plugged in, and this goes pretty deep. Now what I did is on the bottom of this, in the slot, I'm going to take a quick look at it, just see if it's easy to pop. Okay, that wasn't hard. Anyway, what I did is the same thing. I put the X-Acto blade as close to the center as that is possible, and just did the same thing. Spin it around, get you just a little bit of a pilot going, and then take the same drill bit and go straight up. Now, that hole that's in there comes down to about here. So you're really not going that far. And of course, a pin vise is driven by your hand. So you just, drill along, pull it out once in a while, and wipe off the excess plastic it's taken off. It doesn't take long. This whole thing probably took me about 2 hours to do all this. So it's not that big a deal. And so when I had the top part flipped up and I was pointing to that, that's what you were seeing, that square opening. That was this. You could see the wires coming out. It's that simple. Now, the other side you can pull up and out. I'd have to get in there and see where that comes out. It's not a big deal. You just have to be able to get to the wires when you run them down and through. Okay, so if you decide to go with this is kind of hard to handle. I got flipped around pretty hard right now. If you want to go with the other gun mount, I can't point to it, but basically in the center of the screen there's a circle, and then you see a little bit of brown. That is the bottom of that mount. And you just have to do the same thing. You just have to drill the holes through there. And instead of it going through there, it goes through here. Now I will say, if you do go over on this side, I don't see where it could get hung up. Just make sure that when you run your wires over and around, kind of like, see how I tucked mine behind the harness? I don't want anything hanging out. There's not a lot of moving parts here, but you don't want to introduce anything else that could get caught up in gears or any kind of movement. So I would run it as high as possible. And I might, even do that same little trick with putting a little bit of CA down, just a little tack. What I would do is would take my screwdriver, that little one I was using, put it in the CA, and then just come down and tap the surface every inch or so. And then I would come back and press the wire down in that area, let it dry, and move on to the next. And that works very well. I've done that again on a lot of trains. One other thing I'll mention real quick. I like the infrared battles, but the big problem is the infrared LED that's behind here on the gun. When you shoot, that fans out so wide. Let's see if I can set this down in a way that makes sense. It fans out so wide, say the LED is here. It's fanning out so wide in every direction that, I mean, you see where the barrel's aiming, I could hit something way over here. And that's just not realistic. Not realistic at all. So what I wanted to do is narrow this angle so it's not, so it's more realistic. Your LED light that, and here's a trick if you don't know it. If you want to test and see if a remote control's bad, or if you want to see that infrared light, grab your phone, grab a camcorder, aim it at the light, press a button on your remote, or go ahead and fire the cannon and aim this toward that infrared light. And your camcorder or phone will pick it up. It looks a little purplish. So your naked eye will not pick it up. Anyway, by making this more narrow like this, what that does is now it's more realistic. The tank has got to be somewhere more out in front of your barrel. Because I played this once with my wife, and boy, was it fun. But I noticed pretty quick, not accurate. Not accurate at all. So what I did is, I think, Green Valley, or Evergreen, I think it's Evergreen, styrene. You can get it at Hobby Lobby, you can order it. I bought the 1/8 inch tubes. Okay, it's 1/8 inch diameter outside. And what I did, it is a little bit of a pain in the butt because I don't know why, but on some tanks, that's got to be longer. My Tiger tank is way out here somewhere, and I don't know if I'm getting reflection off of here or what, but the little mushroom that sits on the other tank, if it sees any of the infrared light, it's going to register a hit. And I really didn't like, again, if the paper is one tank and here's the other tank and I would fire, it would hit that paper or hit the, this, we're saying that's a tank. It would hit it. I'm like, no. So the tank almost had to be next to it or behind it for it not to register as a hit. So what that does is it makes it much more, it makes that angle of the infrared light coming out much more narrow. And again, like I said, you have to play with it. And it is a little frustrating because you have to kind of glue it on there before you know if it's going to work. And the other thing you have to do, because the infrared light will bleed through, it's a white tube. So I paint the inside black. I come back, sand the back a little bit, and then I'll paint the outside. And I tried just tacking that on there with a little bit of CA, but then you get all kinds of light bleed coming around that thing. So I just go ahead and glue it completely on. If it doesn't work, I have to snap it off and put a longer one on there. But it's well worth it. And the way to test it is just have that tank. Have another tank in front of it over here. And once it starts getting, I don't know, somewhere kind of like in this range, it doesn't have to be dead in front of it, but somewhere close to the front range of where the can is pointing. And that's what you're concerned about, the way the cannon is pointing. And then fire and see if the other one doesn't wiggle. And that lets you kind of, fine tune. Now, I'm sure I've not done this yet, but if you take them outside, I hear they're a lot less sensitive. I don't plan on doing a whole lot of that, so I'm just passing along something I tried and thought was pretty cool. I'll move over here to the LED and show you that. Okay, so what I do, we've got a solder station here, and I usually dial it down some. Now this time I didn't, and anyone that's had experience soldering will understand. If not, you will by the time I get done. What I do is I just take a little bit of electrical tape, one side up, the other two sides down. This is the, and a lot of reflection, that's the ultrafine wire. In fact, it's a little hard to come by sometimes, like Walthers for train stuff sometimes carries it. Sometimes you just have to go online and find it. Sometimes it's hard to find. It's a 10-foot length, and you'd be surprised how fast you go through that. All right, so the tape here helps hold the LED. Now this is what's going to separate someone that has some experience with soldering from those that don't. But when you buy these, and it's pretty cheap. Each one of these LEDs is probably, I don't know, a 1 cent, 2 cents, something like that. This yellow tape just, at the end of these, it's like a reel, like a film. And so there's no interruption. They just put that on there. You can see the reel stopped here. Typically, a computer is setting these, and then it goes through an oven and completes the soldering process. Okay? That's the LED. This is the bottom side. I would have to look up because I've forgotten. That symbol right there tells you which side is positive or negative, but once you have your wires on there and you want to check it, you can just check it. But with this size LED, you got to have the 330 ohm resistor on it. Okay, there's a little tiny pad. Let me do this. This magnifies it times 8. Okay, you can see on the ends, there's a tiny bit of copper. Okay. And the other side is where the light comes out. So what I typically do is I will rotate, can't really do this on camera, rotate the LED about like that. And then you get your solder iron good and hot. Now I turned mine's all the way up to, geez, almost 900. That's max for that one. Then you just tap it on the end of the solder. It's called tinning. You just want a tiny bit, just a tiny bit on the end. And then what I do is, oh, and I have some of those like cheater type glasses, so I couldn't do this with the naked eye. And the ones I bought are cheap, probably $20 or less. I come in with that solder on there and just come down and tap it. It's not like super quick because it has to bond to those two little pads. And those two little pads are very, very thin, foil-like pads. And they're easy to tear off once your wire's on there. So, yeah, this, again, is the hardest part. So, I'll do that, and then I'll wipe the tip and make sure you got a really good clean tip. Tin it again. You're not talking about a big old drip on the end, just a little bit. And then come in and tap it. Just it's almost like you can't even count. You just come down and right back off, because it'll melt it. It'll be gone just like that. Once that's done, you can come back and check it, and your little copper strips there. The top one is wider for some reason. Will have a little bit of the. It'll be totally covered with the solder. You'll know it. The other thing I do is if I can find the wire. Yeah. Now that wire is way too long, to be honest. About twice as long as it needs to be, as far as stripped. So what I like to do is I will come in, let's just say about an eighth. And I've already tinned the wire, which is the same thing. And you can leave the tip on there a little longer. You won't hurt anything there. The LED will melt, but the wire will be fine. Having trouble getting it to focus. But what you do is you carefully get it right down on top of the end. You notice how I have about 1/10 of an inch hanging beyond it? That's on purpose, because that is where I put the tip of the solder gun. And that heat will wick its way right up the wire and make contact. And if you're watching close with the little glasses on, you should be able to see when it's wet and hot, and then just pull it away. If you try to do it like right there on it, you're not going to have much success. When you bring it up further, and again, this wire's way too long. You want the insulation to be like there, and then let's see, I don't know. Yeah, let me just cut it real quick. Okay. Should have done that before. So once you're all tinned up and ready to go, and plate the wire, bend it, get it the way you want it. That's still kind of long. Anyway, I kind of get the insulation pretty close. Yeah, like so. So the wire and the LED already have solder. Then you come in and just kind of, you can touch the end of the wire with the solder iron. and then just watch real close. You'll see it flow. And then my test, because I press that down with the backside of X-Acto pretty good down on, because it's pretty sticky. And I like to get that angle too. You note the angle I'm using. That way, one hand can be doing this, and my right hand can have the pencil tip right on there, and the heat will run along that wire, and you'll see it join up. Also, twist the wire before you tin it. That's a if not, when this gets hot, it's gonna wanna. It only has 4 strands, so but it is gonna kind of go all over the place, and you don't want that. So twist it before you tin the wire. Okay, and once it's on there, I would just pull up, and if the LED comes with it, I call that a success. Another thing I do after that is just take some small scissors or something, cut off that excess. Then move on, do it again for the other side, and then cut off the excess. After that, what I normally do is I will take a little bit of the CA and put it on top of the LED. On top, well, I say on top, but where the wires are. And maybe just a little bit around the sides. Because, again, that foil will pop off so fast from that LED, and then it's ruined. There's no way, because there is, believe it or not, there's a wire that is super, super thin going from the back side of that foil to the one side of the LED. And same for the other. Once that comes off, you are never going to find that and solder it back on. So I probably went through, in the beginning, close to a dozen of these. So that's what I've learned, that if you take anything away from this at all, when you're doing really small LEDs like this, if you have any other questions, let me know. But that's what worked the best for me. I like to angle the end of that wire just a bit and come on in there. And I'm telling you what, I just remembered this because it's been a while. See, I didn't twist the wire, and you can tell it. You want to twist that wire before you solder it. You bring it right in there, and when you solder it, make sure you solder that wire from the end all the way, have solder along all of it. That little trick right there that means a lot, because if you don't do that and you try to put that solder too close to the LED, you're gonna get unless you're just super lucky, you're gonna get a bad solder. It'll pop right back off. Um, your chances of melting the LED is much, much higher. This is just a piece of card. So that's what I say. I put a drop or two of the CA on here. Hobby shops have it. This Gorilla Glue works really good. I always use the medium. Loctite also makes a really good one, but make sure the one I use is very similar to this. It's not the thick stuff where you have to squeeze the sides. I was never really impressed with that. And it takes longer to dry. This, once I take a little bit of that on here and wipe it on the wire, and then press that wire down where I want it, and I'll sit there and just puff on it a few times and hold it for, maybe 15 seconds. Then it's not going anywhere, and I move on to the next. And if I want to go back, I can add a little more of the CA if I want to. Just keep in mind, you don't want to add too much, because what happens is when you apply it the second time, it tends to soften the first application, even though it's totally dry. So when I put that on the end of the gun, if that's the gun, and I put the LED right here, and I just pressed it on with my finger and held it. I let it dry completely, and then I'd come over here and dip that on there, and then run it along the edges of the LED, and then just a little bit on the wire, and then just completely leave it alone. You gotta have patience with it because it's the first application is gonna soften up on you a little bit. After that, give it a good hour, probably a good hour. What I did is just bend the wires carefully around. And like I said, I just keep going back and forth, get a little bit of that, wipe it on the back of the wires. You don't want a lot because then it takes too long to dry. And then you can use something like a toothpick, or if you want to, your finger or fingernail, just gently press that against there. After about 10-15 seconds, it's going to hold, and then you just keep working your way down. If you have a stair step, I usually take the back side of the blade and will press that wire against that little recess and put a little CA there and press it and hold it. Now your wires will be sticking out like so, and then put a little bit of glue, bend them around. You just kind of stair step your way along. And then the wire becomes virtually invisible. All right, so I covered a lot of stuff. I may throw something on there about the headlights later, but that is very straightforward. The headlights, um, I think I explained that already. And you don't need LED, you don't need resistors for that or anything. You just want those lights to be 5 millimeter lights. I'm really surprised they only put one on there because the pictures I've seen, I was watching a movie and I can't remember what year, but it's called Super 8. And they had some Walker Bulldogs in there, and it had two headlights. If you go online and look, you'll see it. And I also saw it on YouTube. So I'm like, I know these things have two headlights in the front, so that's why I'm going to change it to that. Hopefully this has been helpful. Here's some of that shrink tube I use. It's pretty small stuff, but like I said, the hardest thing is doing that LED. The rest is it's really not too bad. Um, I wouldn't I wouldn't mind helping somebody if they needed it. You'd have to send me your gun because I have to solder it to it, or I could solder the wires on the LED and send it. But I'm telling you, those wires pop off the LED so easily. So when I put the CA on the back where the wires are soldered onto the LED, and then press it onto the gun, and then I go around it again, like I said, like a fillet, and that completely dries, then it's strong. And I figure, if I've got it in my hands already, I would go ahead and run that back. And if you don't have a vise, a pin vise or something, I could drill the hole through there. I would just need those three pieces: the gun, the swivel piece, and the piece underneath it, because that's what I would drill up and through, and then put the wires down. But that's specific to that LED, and I know that LED doesn't take very much voltage at all, where most of the 5 millimeters are like 3 to 3.2 ish, and the board is made to run one of those. these LEDs run at probably less than a volt easily. So it would blow it up without the resistor. So once you would get it back, you'd want to make sure that one of those wires coming off it has the um, resistor in line just on the one lead, because if not, it's just going to blow and have to do it all over again. All right, hope you found this entertaining, and if you want to do it yourself, now you know how to do it or how I did it. All right, take care.